Hello everybody and welcome back to Witch's Castle. I am Will Castle and today we have another deck tech for you, but before we get too far into it, I'm going to go ahead and pester you and ask you to click the subscribe button down below. Basically, you can get all of the videos every time they come out, that kind of deal. Also makes me feel good because I watch the numbers tick around a little bit. If you could go ahead and also click the like button before we get too far into anything. Also because it makes the numbers click around and it makes me happy, but also because I have a smiley face tattooed on one of my fingers, and that's the only button you can click that has a finger on it, so it's the closest you can get. And you can ring the bell if you want to keep having me ramble at you like this. Today, we're actually looking at one of the Final Fantasy cards. They started spoilers for the Final Fantasy crossover, and today we're looking at Celes Rune Knight. She's a Mardu queen. I love Mardu and Mardu queens, so I'm looking forward to it. I don't know a whole lot about Final Fantasy, actually. This is one of those instances where Magic is going to bring me into a different game with a universes beyond kind of thing. There's been some other ones that I haven't been super interested in, like The Walking Dead. That existed, but the show doesn't really interest me, and neither did the cards a whole lot personally. So it didn't really work in that aspect. But this is going to make me look at Final Fantasy as a franchise a little bit more. So here we have Celes. She is a 4-cost 4/4. She costs 1, a red, a white, and a black. And she's a legendary human wizard knight. Those are certainly some creature types. When Celes enters, discard any number of cards, then draw that many cards plus 1. Whenever one or more other creatures you control enter, if one or more of them entered from a graveyard or was cast from a graveyard, put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. My brain went a couple of directions when I read this the first time. I started with kind of an unearth path because it's an easy way to get stuff out of your graveyard. They get counters. It's awesome. Except with unearth, they go away at the end step, so it's not quite as potent. What I ended up going with is Persist as kind of the backbone combo-y piece of this deck. For those of you who don't know, let me pull up a Persist card. Murderous Redcap is a Persist card. Persist is a mechanic that says whenever this creature is put into a graveyard from play, if it had no -1/-1 counters on it, return it to play under its owner's control with a -1/-1 counter on it. So here's the deal. Thanks to Celes, when that guy enters, if he comes from the graveyard, he's going to put a +1/+1 counter on each creature we control. That includes himself. So that'll cancel out the -1/-1 counter that's on him and remove both of them simultaneously. That's how a lot of the combos that have done Persist things work. That's how a lot of the combos with Yawgmoth work, is making them come back into play with a regular +1/+1 as well. So this kind of enables that kind of combo in the command zone, so I decided to kind of work that into it, along with some of the other graveyard-based shenanigans. If you have been watching for a little bit now, you know I really like graveyard decks, so any opportunity I can get to talk about another one, I will. So let's get into it. First up in our Planeswalkers section, we have Dihada, Binder of Wills. This is the only Planeswalker in the set. Haha, Binder of Wills, don't make any jokes. She is a 4-cost 5 loyalty Planeswalker. She's 1, a red, a white, and a black. And she has a +2 that says up to 1 target legendary creature gains Vigilance, Lifelink, and Indestructible until your next turn. A -3 that says reveal the top 4 cards of your library. Put any number of legendary cards from among them into your hand, and the rest into your graveyard. Create a treasure token for each card put into your graveyard this way. And then she has a -11 that says gain control of all non-land permanents until end of turn. Untap them, they gain haste until end of turn. So, for me, Planeswalker, the ability on this one that I care the most about is the -3. People have played this card as a CEDH commander before because of the -3. Being able to get some card selection and mana advantage at the same time is really good for us. It gives us a good way to fill up our graveyard a little bit more. And admittedly, there's not necessarily a whole lot of legendary things in here, so it might not give you a whole lot of actual cards in hand. But what it will do is give you mana in a deck that's going to end up being mana hungry, and it will give you card selection because you're going to want to reanimate things out of your graveyard anyway. Down in our creatures section is arguably where most of the interesting stuff is, where most of the interesting interactions happen. We've got a bunch of these generically graveyard-centric cards: Apprentice Necromancer, Doomed Necromancer, Lord of the Forsaken. These are cards that either reanimate something or give us the ability to get stuff out of our graveyard. Lord of the Forsaken via mana, and these two via sacrifices that reanimate something. We're also running Enduring Angel and Crystal Barricade. These are both creatures that give us hexproof, and that's going to protect our graveyard from potential exile shenanigans if it's a bulk exile kind of effect being pointed directly at us. Most graveyard exile things that are bulk will say target player's graveyard, so these will make it so they have to have more specific graveyard interaction if they want to interact with us. We have a handful of persist creatures in here. This one is one of the main combo-centric ones because it can win the game on its own with those triggers. This is Murderous Redcap. So when it comes into play, it deals damage equal to its power to target creature or player. And it's a 4-mana 2/2 with persist. So basically, if we have a free sack outlet in play and our commander on board, we can actually just go infinite on the spot because we'll be able to sacrifice it and have it go to the graveyard and come back with the counters. And because of that, it'll be able to enter and infinitely deal the damage to each creature or player that we choose. So this is one of the go-to creatures, is one of the combo engines. This deck is very combo heavy. I've found recently that Mardu decks either are combo or combat heavy. There's no in between with them. So this one's a little more combo heavy. It has a few combat tricks, but it's mostly combos. So put both of the Eldrazi Titans in here, that both of the original ones that are legal for us, of course, because when they're put into a graveyard from anywhere, they shuffle the graveyard into our library. We have a couple of Infinite Mill Ourselves combos in here as ways to win with things like Sir Conrad and Flayer of the Hatebound. So putting these two in here just gives us redundancy on the ability to make sure we don't get hosed when we're going through those combos. Speaking of combos, if you guys are familiar with Mardu combo decks from the past 2 or 3 years, then you're probably familiar with Abdel Adrian Gorian's Ward. When he enters the battlefield, you exile any number of other non-land permanents you control until he leaves, and you create a 1/1 soldier for each permanent exiled this way. So this card actually goes infinite with Animate Dead, or any of the versions of Animate Dead that are the enchantments that stick to a creature. Basically what it does is Abdel is in your graveyard, you Animate Dead and get Abdel back. When he enters the battlefield, Animate Dead is in play, so you exile the Animate Dead as one of the permanents with Abdel, and then whatever else you want, whether it's a creature with an enters the battlefield effect, or a mana rock that you've tapped for mana, because now you can produce it infinitely. What'll happen is those things will get exiled, and the Animate Dead will disappear. So Abdel Adrian has to get sacrificed per the rule of its own text. Once that gets sacrificed, all of those non-land permanents come back into play, including the Animate Dead, and you get to pick a new target for it once it enters. You pick Abdel Adrian again, and repeat the process. Choosing to float any mana that you would like to in between, or activating any abilities that you have that are activated at instant speed via haste mechanics. So that's one of the combos in the deck. There's plenty of ways to search for and put all of the pieces you need into your graveyard. It's just a matter of deciding when and if it's the right call, and also deciding what pieces you want to use to win with it. That combo actually can potentially set you up with a win with just your commander, because you can blink your commander with this effect, and you actually don't even have to discard any cards, because when it enters, it will draw you that many cards plus 1. So if you discard 0, you draw 0 plus 1. You blink this infinitely and draw out your whole deck. If you have infinite mana, you have your whole deck in hand and infinite mana. You cast the Sir Conrad. You use one of these discard triggers to discard one of the Eldrazi Titans. You shuffle it all back in, and every single time you go through that loop of putting cards into your graveyard and then shuffling them back in, Sir Conrad will trigger and dome through your whole board until they're dead. There's a couple of other options. Molten Gatekeeper just says whenever another creature enters, so you don't need basically anything but the mana rocks necessary to go infinite. Not even that, actually. Abdel plus the Animate Dead plus Molten Gatekeeper just wins because Abdel will keep re-entering, and the fact that he's exiling something will also make a 1/1 soldier enter, so that's another way you can go infinite. Same with Murderous Redcap, blinking it over and over again, regardless of whether it's because of Persist, it will kill people. I also have Flayer of the Hatebound in here as one of the cards that we're going to try to use to win the game. It's a 4/2 with Undying, which is the reverse of Persist, which does the opposite of what we want it to in this case, but we don't mind as much. Because it says whenever Flayer of the Hatebound or another creature enters the battlefield from your graveyard, that creature deals damage equal to its power to target creature or player. This is going to give us another way to use our infinite blinky style effects to dome people, provided they come from the graveyard. Abdel Adrian is one of those loops because the Animate Dead pulls it out of the graveyard. He'll be doming people for damage the whole time too. So you don't even need the infinite mana options if you have any assembly of these creatures that give you an enters the battlefield effect that harms your opponent's ability to stop you. Running Hoarding Broodlord and the Saw in Half, but we're not running the normal CEDH version of that goes for, I think it's Sacrifice and Peer into the Abyss. We're not running that particular version just because this isn't a CEDH list, at least in this version. It's got combos and it is going to be potent, but this is more of a like high power casual table. So I ended up not going that route. You can basically just search for whatever 2 cards you want. In this case, it could be Abdel and Animate Dead. It gives you your 2-card combo immediately. It could be Murderous Redcap and whatever you need to cast your commander. Genuinely, it's just open-ended enough that you have the flexibility to pick cards. We're going to roll down into the sorcery section here. You'll notice that it is nothing but black cards, and that's because I like black. Black's my favorite color in Magic other than green. Those are my 2. I'm a Golgari King. What can I say? I've got the green and black hair. All but like one of these is either a reanimate spell or a tutor for a card and put it into your graveyard spell. Damn is the only board wipe in here that isn't attached to a creature. Theoretically, Skyclave Apparition can function as a board wipe if we blink it enough times, but I'm not running any board wipe centric creatures in here just because there's enough to target blank. Like the Murderous Redcap can deal damage to target creature, so if we can only loop it a couple times in a turn, that's still pretty okay. And a lot of our other removal is in instants, so we just got 1 board wipe. It's damn. It's good enough for me. It might be greedy. The deck might need updates. We'll see once the rest of the set comes out. In the instance, there's not a whole lot of interesting going on here. This is mostly removal. We're a graveyard-centric deck. There's a lot of stacks pieces and a lot of cards that just exist now that will make our jobs harder than we want it to be. So, exile target non-land permanent, destroy artifact, enchantment, or planeswalker, exile a non-land permanent. These are all going to be ways that we can exile artifacts and enchantments that might be stacks pieces accidentally, stopping us from doing what we want. We talked the other day about Path and Swords. They're both in here. Every time I play white, they will be. March of Otherworldly Light's going to be a huge one for us, getting to remove multiple things with a single spell. If we find ourselves in a situation where we don't need some of the cards in our hand, we just need to get around a few pieces, this is a good way to go for us. On here in the artifact section, it's fairly boring in terms of mana. That's all just generic mana rocks that I have available on hand. I try not to go too crazy overboard with some of the budgets on these decks. Most of these are cards that you've probably acquired from precons and or loose packs at this point. Any of the notable exceptions generally have good replacements straight across. So if the budget of these decks is ever a problem that people are having, you can also log into Moxfield, check out the deck list yourself. You can change the printings to be the cheapest versions and see what you end up looking like for that. But yeah, I try to be budget friendly, I really do. A lot of this is based off of information that is in my collection, and then a lot of it is information based off of if I were to build this deck for a video where I'm doing gameplay, these are the cards that I would pick. And I try to keep it within a decent budget for that. Obviously, the Eldrazi Titans are a little spendy, but you can replace them in this deck with things like Elixir of Immortality, shuffles itself back into your graveyard with another card. It's a little extra mana, but you're going infinite, might as well. Anyway, back to the artifacts. Most of them are the regular 1 and 2 mana cost mana rocks you're used to. I put a border post in here again. I like the border posts. I'm going to keep playing them every time I can. Get used to seeing them. It's just going to be one of the things I do. And then we're running 3 different altars. We have Altar of Dementia, sacrifice to make somebody mill. This could be us. This could be them. This could be a win con if we're finding ways to infinitely bring that creature back via, like, Persist. That Persist creature we saw earlier that has no relevant text, this makes it relevant now, because you just get to mill them infinitely, or yourself infinitely if you choose. Ashnod's Altar gives us 2 colorless mana every time we sacrifice a creature. There are combos in here that just need us to have a free sack outlet, and this one makes mana, so that means they also make infinite mana. It's a pretty straightforward case for me. Phyrexian Altar is much the same deal. It just makes a colored mana, so it goes slightly more infinite because you have more options, technically. The other interesting artifact in this section is going to be Cauldron of Souls. It's a 5 mana artifact that says tap, choose any number of target creatures. Each of those creatures gain persist until end of turn. There's a little bit of political wiggle room. I've talked before about political wiggle room in cards and how it gives them more flexibility. And that exists in here because it says any number of target creatures, not just yours. How the may ever, this is not going to be a particularly politically influenced deck if you couldn't tell. We're planning on just kind of ramming the creatures out of the graveyard straight down the road, if we're being honest. So this is another potential, oh, I have a combo piece now. It fills in for the lack of creatures in here that actually have straight up persist. There are some better ones that might find their way into later versions of this deck for me. But for right now, Cauldron of Souls, it's fun and gimmicky, so I'm going to play it because that's kind of what I want to do. And we'll roll into the enchantments, and this is going to be the last actually interesting section of this. The lands, nothing. It's just dual lands. There's potentially interesting things later down the road. But yeah, there's no important lands to talk about. So we're just going to talk about the enchantments. Animate Dead, you are aware of by now. It's part of the combo piece with Abdel Adrian. It's also a way to reanimate something in a pinch if we need to, just to stay alive. Leyline of Sanctity. This is another one of those you have hexproof cards, because I wanted it. And it's a leyline, so it can come into play for free if you get it in an opening hand, which I really don't mind. So yeah, I wanted it. We're a graveyard deck, and we're in Mardu. We gotta play some random self-protection cards. These are normally the places where people play Grand Abolisher or Avacyn. Avacyn's really good. Should go into probably your version of this deck if you want. I chose to spend that chunk of the budget on the Eldrazi Titans. And then Meticulous Excavation. This card I put in originally when I was doing more of the Unearth mechanics because it helps get you around Unearth exiling your creatures. But then I decided to cut a bunch of the Unearth stuff and almost cut this, but I decided to keep it because to me, in the worst case scenario, my commander has a really solid ETB, and there's at least one card in here with Unearth. So, I mean, that part's good, but I'm genuinely just playing it so that I can bounce things back to my hand. Especially if I have infinite mana, I'm gonna want to be able to bounce stuff back to my hand. And if I'm in a loop that doesn't involve Abdel Adrian, but instead involves a Persist Sacrifice loop with one of these altars, and it can give me infinite mana, this now says I can do infinite blinking of any permanent, and that gives you a little bit more flexibility. I don't know, it might find its way out. It might get better as I decide to put more Unearth cards in here. We will see. And yeah, like I said, lands are super boring. There's a Phyrexian Tower. Extra mana. There's a Takenuma. Put cards in your graveyard. There's a Plaza of Heroes. There's legendary cards. That's it. The lands are pretty boring on this one. But the deck overall, not boring. I love a good old-fashioned Mardu beatdown deck. I have a Sir Gawain Knights deck that I've been on and off playing Sir Gawain for probably 4 or 5 years now. Came out, obviously, in the original Throne of Eldraine set, and I built a deck around her at that time, and loved it. Ended up parting ways with it because it had a lot of good cards, and I needed money. And recently got back into having it, and it's one of my favorite decks. Sir Gawain and just Mardu in general has a very special place in my heart. I love the fact that Mardu is graveyards, but they're angry about it. That's the thing I like. Graveyards, but they're angry about it. Or sometimes they're just dudes with big sticks. Or in this case, chicks with big sticks. Well, groovy, guys. If you liked the video today, go ahead and click the subscribe button. I really, really, really do want to see those numbers climbing up a little bit more. I've gotten a sponsorship recently, so I'm trying to push the content to be a little more better and a little more consistent. Watching my content should be a dialogue for people, and I'm hoping that I can encourage more people to start conversating with me, whether it's in the comments or on some of my social media platforms. And subscribing to the channel is one of the ways that it's easiest for me to communicate with all of you guys. You can also go ahead and like the video. You made it all the way through at this point. You might as well take the last couple seconds you have of attention span to click the like button for me. We made the finger joke earlier about how one of my fingers has a smiley face on it. You thought that was funny. Like, click the button. Yeah, thank you. Groovy. And then there's a notification button. It's a little bell. If you click that, you'll know when I post stuff. Or you won't, because notifications are weird sometimes, and technology is a finicky thing. But thank you guys so much for watching and making it all the way through this video. I will see you guys in the next one. Bye.